What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Across the Pitch with myself, Dave Miller, Jose Nunez, and we have a special guest today with Todd Lewis of the Free Kick Pod joining us. First of all, Todd, how are you doing?
Doing great. Big shoes to fill tonight, filling in for Mike. I don't know how I'm gonna do, but I said this last week on your show. How the hell is your mic working? And it wasn't on mine. Like I'm still upset about that, Dave. Like, what is going on? I mean, I'm glad I can hear you. Don't have to put up my recording device all the way up to hear you. But come on, Dave.
I mean, look. I have it's a different mic, I think, from the one I used on your podcast because I was at my dad's, so I was using a mic that obviously he has there, and obviously I got probably, as you can see, a microphone that's probably closer to my mouth as opposed to like a long right by my ear. So I apologize for that, Todd. I mean, next time we're on the show, I'll make sure that I have a better microphone. But
I should have just told you to speak into your cell phone.
That's too funny. God, Todd, we're so happy to have you, man. It's as you mentioned, very big shoes to fill in terms of Mike. We miss him. He's busy working through some stuff, and he needed the night off. So we're so glad that we're able to phone a friend, right? Like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? We're able to just give you a text, give you a call, and you're more than happy to jump on. And luckily for us, we don't have to send as many phone books to get you on camera like we do with Mike. So we're just. Yeah, I think ecstatic to continue to grow in terms of getting more and more folks in here. And, I think we have, and I pitched this to Dave for next week. Maybe we can work through it, but maybe we can do a special something union related with all the content creators as we have finally a weird week off, right? Having already played 40 games, it feels like we've been just running nonstop. Maybe we can do sort of an Avenger style big old show with all content creators for the union live on at some point next week, but we can work through those details. Dave, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's going to be a weird week next week. I mean, I'm so used to the Union playing during the international break. I think the two times they did it this year, I think the Union, was it one win, one defeat this year? No, I remember the Orlando game really sticks out in my mind with having Blake out on for Jamaica and having to watch Joe Bendick, starting goal. So
oh my God,
I think we're lucky. We're lucky that we're going to have Andre back in between the sticks. Well, have him in between the sticks for the next game and get the Cincinnati. But of course, before we do go into the show, we have got our sponsors. So I'll quickly just get those up just to get just to smash through them now. I know Jose, you'll be sat here with anticipation. Waiting in anticipation for this. So, of course, first off is Allstate Insurance Agency with Deborah Siegler with 6750 Iroquois Trail, Allentown, PA, specialising in insurance for auto, home, renters, life, and much more. Get a quote today by calling 610-395-6100. Next one's Vinny's Pizza, which is also at 6750 Iroquois Trail, Allentown, PA. Discover a new favourite by trying the top pizzas in Allentown, plus pastas, salads, calzones, sandwiches, and more. Check out their menu for their daily and game day specials at vinnyspizzarestaurant.com. And if you couldn't get enough of the Iroquois Trail, you can also go to Stuff to the Grills, offering a unique twist on the traditional sandwich shop, homemade hot and cold sandwiches, salads, appetizers, baked goods, and much more. Available for catering events, family functions, and more. Check out their menu and their daily/weekly specials at stufftothegrills.com. And obviously, Manscaped, you can get 20% off by using the code AAT Sports at manscaped.com. And last of all, Philly Sports Trips. You can join the guys at AT Birds for their trips to New York or Washington. Secure your spot at phillysportstrips.com and select the Allentown pickup at the checkout.
Dave, correction there. I think that this also applies for union trips, just to be super clear. It should. I would think it should, but I am no business. I'm no business person for this podcast, but I would think that it translates.
Well, I mean, again, if you go to the rest of your union fan here, able to perhaps look at a trip, take a look at the website. Have a dive in the website, go to phillysportstrips.com, and there could be some upcoming union trips, maybe one to Cincinnati in a couple of weeks. But of course, first off, the union last night back to winning ways after incredibly frustrating defeat in Toronto. And I think the message I said to you earlier, Jose, and Mike as well, was the one frustrating team about this team is they can never take the initiative and take advantage of the situation that's presented to them. And they always have that bounce back mentality, and they're able to bounce back after a frustrating result as opposed to going, okay, we'll go to Toronto, we'll win, and then win the next one. And then you're only, 8 points behind with a game in hand against Cincinnati going to there. knowing that gap could become 2 points. Instead, you're hoping it could be 8. For you guys, just a quick review on the Toronto game before we dive into the Red Bulls, Todd. I mean, without being as scathing as you want, can you just give us your assessment of the embarrassing night in Toronto?
I guess, I mean, the big takeaway from that game was just poor defending. Jacob Gledson at fault for all 3 goals. Olivier Bizer, you could fault him for 2 out of 3 of these goals. It just wasn't a typical Philadelphia Union performance, right? Defensively, you felt maybe comfortable going in at halftime, tied 1-1. Julian Kranzle gets that late equalizer, and you're like, all right, this is exactly what the team needs. Don't have to really adjust too much going into the locker room. It's a brand new game to play for, and the team just did not look sharp offensively, but even worse defensively. And I think that's a game that you just want to put in the rear view mirror. And I mean, there's just not much to say. It sucks because you want to catch Cincinnati, and it wasn't to be Wednesday night, and the Union catch a big break this weekend with Cincinnati losing at home to Orlando. And we can talk about the standings if we want a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, just not a great defensive performance. And after a game against DC United on the road too, the Union looked convincing. And I know it's DC United, but the same could be said about Toronto, right? I mean, these are the games that you should be winning. And Jim Curtin says that every week. And maybe fans are getting annoyed hearing it, that, it's hard to win on the road. But I do think there is truth in that. I mean, look, the Union have played 41 games this season, a lot of traveling. They've traveled down to Mexico. They've traveled out west to LA. They've traveled to Minnesota. They've been out to Colorado. All those minutes in the plane are going to add up. And with a coach that doesn't really like to rotate too much, are you really expecting the Union to win on short rest against Toronto? Maybe, because Toronto, I think, coming into the game only had 3 wins all season, but just a performance that wasn't typical of the Union, in my opinion.
No, I was going to say, I believe the win was Toronto's first win in 14 fixtures, including
that's fucking unbelievable.
including the game. I mean, Jose, for you, does that add to the frustration of the defeat? Just being such a typical sort of Union game to go into that game and sort of having that feeling in the back of your mind that if any team is going to lose this game, it's going to be the Union.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you think about how well they perform in DC, and I don't know if there's something to be said about basically making DC your second home, right? In terms of the fandom traveling, having Todd and I were there watching from the stadium in the press box, walking around the stadium, seeing fans all over the place and seeing the jerseys just flood the stadium. So I don't know if there's something to be said about that, but as Jim sort of alluded after during his press conference post-match this week, right? Like, you rewind, and some of the shocker performances of Toronto being, the main one being Glesnes, you rewind a game before Toronto, and Glesnes was probably the best player on that field against DC. So it's just interesting to see what a difference that makes. And honestly, if you rewind the clock even further, we have been responsible for dropping. We dropped 6 points against the bottom 2 teams, right? We lost to Miami at Miami. We lost to Toronto at Toronto, to the basement dwellers of this damn league. And then we have things fortunately happening to us that sort of fall on our lap, right? Having, again, Cincinnati lose in Cincinnati to Orlando. And that was a really good game, actually. I watched all of it, and I was just, Orlando sort of, came up with a blueprint on how to frustrate the hell out of those guys. And Cincinnati's no joke. And I think we'll talk more about them as maybe we eventually get to talk about the Kai Wagner news from yesterday. But nonetheless, Toronto, one to forget. We were absolute garbage. I don't know that we need to rehash much more about it. And I was at the watch party in Malvern, PA, which is entirely too far away from the stadium. You're looking at about 30, 40 minutes. But it was cool, right? To see 25, 30 people there wearing jerseys, and my son cry at the sight of Fang. So that was an awesome evening all around, trying to console him that the big snake man's not going to get him at night.
I was going to say, not to be confused with the Malvern in England, which isn't too far away from me, actually, where I live. It's 15 miles away. But I mean, again, it was just a frustrating game. And I think, again, what was a common theme in Glesnes struggled, and perhaps it was a bit of something that was seen in the game last night against the Red Bulls, moving on to the big 4-1 win last night, it was the Union being stretched again defensively. I know, of course, Jim loves to reiterate in his press conferences, this team cannot play or struggles to be involved in games where the game is stretched and it's end to end. We've seen that way too often in recent weeks. More often than I think I've probably seen the last 2.5 years, really. Yes, the big state man is real. But yeah, again, I mean, Todd, I mean, looking at you, obviously, you take a deeper dive into the build up to the goals and you do that sort of analysis. I mean, for you looking at that first goal on for the Red Bulls on Sunday, just how poor of a goal is it defensively to concede? Just to have that's so much space. In and around the penalty area on the edge, having 3 runners being able to come into the box and marked. I mean, how frustrating was that for you to look back on?
Yeah, it's really frustrating, right? Where you watch that play, the build up to it, and you got to go back 10, 20 seconds before the goal was actually scored. The Union are trying to win the ball up high on the field. Ali Bedoya and Jack McGlynn were your double pivots in this game because of Jose Martinez and Jesus Bueno not available. Leon Flock, Jim Curtin said, I don't know if you guys have talked about this on the podcast yet or not, but Jim Curtin said midweek that Leon Flock's probably going to have to get surgery for his sports hernia, and the hope is that he'll be available come playoff time. But you started this game with 0 depth in the midfield. You loaned out Richard Odada, who scored, by the way, on his debut. I mean, typical, right? And Andres Perea has been playing pretty impressive for New York City, starting consistently for that club. And, questions, I've seen this all the time. People have said it to me, questions should be asked about this front office. It's like, how can Andres get into the starting lineup? And it's a good question to be had. And the only answer that I have is, the Union don't play with a double pivot. I know I just said they played it in this game, but they were kind of forced with all the injuries they had. And Orlando City played with a double pivot. That's where Andres Perea came from. New York City, they play with a double pivot. And so, Andres I feel like maybe more comfortable playing that double pivot system as opposed to playing as one of the shuttlers on the outside as one of the 8s or playing as a lone 6. But the build-up for the goal, Ali Bedoya gets caught up too high on the field. And with the Union playing 5 in the back, 3 in the back when they're attacking, whatever you want to call it, they were defending on this play. So they had 5 in the back. Jack McGlynn was on a guy. And nobody picks up Omir Fernandez. And it should have been Damian Lowe pressing that ball. He should have been more aggressive on that play. And yeah, a little bit unfortunate that he blocks a shot and then it falls right back to Omir Fernandez. But, if Bedoya is not going to be able to get back, which he wasn't, somebody has to be stepping. And that's got to be better communication. And I think we've seen this a couple of times going back to Toronto. The issues defensively was a spacing issue. How many times have we seen that this season, whether it be in the League's Cup against New York Red Bulls, spacing issues on the left-hand side with Damian Lowe, Kai Wagner, with Damian Lowe and Jack Elliott. And again, we see maybe some spacing issues here, lack of communication in the back. Nobody wants to step to the free man. I mean, that just cannot be happening. And you cannot, under any circumstances, let free shots inside your 18-yard box. And that's exactly what happened. And like I said, I mean, Damian Lowe, a little bit unfortunate that he did initially get the block and it falls right back to Fernandez. But somebody has to be more aggressive. In my opinion, it should have been Damian Lowe there.
It's interesting you mentioned this, Todd, because I remember sitting next to Skylar and sort of, popping my head over and saying, are you seeing this? And I'm sure we'll talk about the red card issue that we saw. And honestly, ultimately, absolutely benefited from for the first time in a long, long time, right? It's not often that the Union actually do well with the man up. And Jim has said it as much, right? So on the record saying we are not a good team. We tend to not be a great team being a man up because it's almost like a kid, right? They just don't know what to do with their hands, right? They're just sort of like fidgeting the whole time. But when we were a man up towards the early to mid stages of the second half, it was, I brought Oscar Budegen to the game, who is the Spanish voice, radio voice for the Eagles and the Phillies. And I turned over to him and to Skyler and like, do we even have a man up? Right. Because it seems like that defensive pressure is just so different from last year. And I know Jim has mentioned a couple of times of like, we've regressed in a few ways. And I think having watched the last couple of games, and absolutely Toronto being, the prime example, and honestly DC, where that game probably should have been closer than it was. Defensively, that's the area where this team has really, really gone back in time quite a bit. It's hard to imagine, it being compared to last year's, almost like defensive wall that we had in a way.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think obviously leading on to that point defensively and looking at how much it has regressed, I think that's probably the most frustrating thing. That's just a friend of mine, Jamie. Also up at 2 a.m. in the UK. That's probably the most frustrating things, really. It's just how the defensive unit of this team was probably the biggest strong point. You knew if the Union were going to go on the road and they were going to lack an attacking threat, you knew, do you know what, they probably have a good chance of keeping a clean sheet and getting a 0-0 draw, getting out there with a point. But this season, they just look so weak and fragile at the back. Like, as you sort of said, Todd, the spacing of the team is just, defensively, there's just so many gaps for the opposition to exploit. They're so stretched defensively as well. That when Kai Wagner pushes on, there's no one out there no one sort of perhaps drifts out left a bit to try and cover that left-hand side if someone is trying to come out and attack that area. I mean, it's just, the team is just defensively, it's just so frustrating to see. And we saw it at the start of the second half as well, when the Red Bulls probably could count themselves a bit unlucky to have not, perhaps, not scored, but perhaps had a big goal scoring opportunity, because there was a big goal scoring opportunity with the Andre Blake save and then the firing across the goal. I mean, the Union it was way too easy. But of course, before we go into the red card, obviously the Union got back on level terms with Jacob Glesnes. Kai Wagner's corner into the box was sort of put into a cluster of players in around the 6-yard box. The Rebels keeper, I think Carlos Coronel, couldn't properly punch the ball clear, and Glesnes was there like a proper striker, poacher, drifted off from his marker and just popped the ball into the back of sort of, not saying empty net, but through a crowd of players and found the back of the net. And then I think, sort of Eric sort of summed up the team right at the moment. It's just, the team is frustrating. I think we've seen it so many times this season, missed opportunities, even in the CCL. I think it's not just the players, the gym as well has been frustrating. There's just been so many times this season when this team has been frustrating. Of course, to get back on level terms, and you're sort of hoping the team could kick on. Then, of course, the red card incident. Jose, I know you had something to say on that, and I think we both agreed on it.
Yeah, very, very interesting red card, right? And Todd, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, because I know I didn't get a chance to ask you in the press box, but something had to be given for that offense in terms of the ball being, I think, lifted up to the player's hand and the arm sort of getting in the way. But it really did feel like a soft yellow card. But I understand that the referee, by the rules of the book, right, stopping an entire, attacking play. I think it was a counterattack at that too, like a nice little buildup. Felt a little soft. So what did you think, Todd? Did you feel that way? Did you feel like it was completely justified? I know that some other reporters in the press box after the match sort of, set their recording devices and were seeking the referee for clarification on his way of thinking. And I don't know that it was really conclusive, really, but I'd love to hear from you, Todd.
Yeah, I think I understand why the red card was given. I think it was probably, by the rules of the game, yes, it is a handball. And I think the referee said after the game that Sean Nealis, the player, when Red Bulls who got the red card, stopped a promising attack. And so that's why it was given. I don't know how promising it really was, if I'm being honest.
I don't think there's anything promising with the Union when it's 11 versus 11 going in an attack, right?
Yeah, it feels that way sometimes, right? And I was sitting next to Peter Andrews in the press box, and we said to each other, like, oh man, the Union got to convince them to not send Sean off because they play so bad up a man. And and maybe that was part of the conversation. Maybe Jim's like, oh, you don't have to send him off. You don't have to send him off. But the referee, and you saw the New York Red Bulls coach, Troy Lazan, just going berserk. And I think he's justified in doing it. In his post-game press conference, he couldn't really speak his mind because he didn't want to be fined. But I think we're all agreeing that, it is a soft red card. And it changes the complexity of this game, which is a little bit surprising because, again, I feel like the Union don't play great, a man up. And I was trying to go through my notes when you guys were talking, because remember I did a podcast a few months ago where I talked about that very subject, where the Union, it might have been against Chicago Fire, but I couldn't find it in my notes. And I was like, what is the Union's record up a man? Because everybody says it's so bad. And if I can remember off the top of my head, I think from 2013, 2015, the Union were horrible. And then towards the last 5 years, they actually started winning those games. But I don't know, they feel a lot closer. And I don't have the numbers in front of me to justify that. But trying to remember something 4 months ago, yeah, it's really difficult. But
I think you don't have to look. You don't have to look much further than. And this is the example I always go back to. Mike makes fun of me. Dave probably chuckles a little bit, but again, that match against New York Red Bull, where we're up a man, up a goal, and we end up tying at home with all those circumstances at hand, and giving, I think, honestly, being the butterfly effect moment, right? Where that's what leads to LAFC getting home field advantage and ultimately winning the cup. So I don't think you have to look much further than that as the biggest wound in terms of being a man up and being bad.
That's true. I mean, I guess that's the most recent example, right? But yeah, I mean, just a soft second yellow card. And what do you guys think? I'll throw it back to you. What did you guys think about the referee's performance? I mean, I feel like a lot of calls went the Union's way. We had 2 set-piece goals scored by the Union, which was the first time this season that they've scored 2 in a game, and now they have 6 for the season, which I think is tied for 6 with 5 other teams. So, I mean, we've seen the Union the last couple of years be dominant ever since they hired Frank Leich to be their set-piece coach, and this season, defensively and offensively, they've struggled set-piece-wise, and one thing that I've noticed too is their throw-ins really haven't been the greatest of this season. And
we need Thomas back.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some truth to that, right? Because I look at a team like Liverpool. I think they struggle a little bit too with the throw-ins, and that's a club that Thomas worked heavily with. I mean, let's face it, right? There's not many teams that put all the effort into set pieces, but just such little details can go a long way. And you hear Jim Curtin talk about it all the way, about winning those little battles, winning those set piece battles, how it can give you such a big advantage. And that's something the Union have struggled with this season. So it's a little bit surprising that the Union scored 2 set piece goals this season. But I guess at the same time, when you look at the size difference, Jim also talked about that. The Union wanted to take advantage of that, and take advantage of it they did, but definitely a soft yellow card.
That Damian Lowe header was incredible.
Oh, yeah. So it was a great header, but I think, again, I mean, I know, of course, you haven't been as threatening from set pieces this year, and I think at times I probably said in the podcast, I mean, Kai Wagner's corners, his free kicks haven't been very good. They've struggled to beat the first man. They've either, they've not been into dangerous areas. They haven't really given the Union opportunities to really attack the ball for free, as we sort of saw. For the 2 goals yesterday with the first one, put it into a dangerous area, forcing the goalkeeper to have to make a choice and decision on whether to attack the ball, and he did. He failed to really make clear contact, and the second ball came up, and then I think, as you sort of mentioned, Jose, for that second goal, the free kick, beautifully swung in, and Lowe's done brilliantly to come across, get the diving header, and thump it into the back of the net. And I think that's what the Union have been lacking with their set pieces this year. And I think at times I probably called for Jack McGlynn to be placed on the set pieces, because I think when when Kai hasn't been in the game and Jack has been in there, perhaps there has been a slight improvement in the set pieces that have been taken. But I think Kai's starting to get into his stride now, and I think, as is sort of the motto in the MLS, soon, as long as you kick on heading into the playoffs and you start to really find your form heading into the playoffs, it doesn't really matter what you do in the regular season, as long as you're in the 8, 9, however many places there are now, with the stupid playing NBA style playing thing. But I mean, as long as you're hitting form at the right time, and I think, again, from a set piece perspective, especially attacking wise, I think the Union are starting to do that, and they're starting to find their groove again, because they have scored a fair few more set pieces. For you, Todd, obviously with that second goal, what did you see? I mean, of course, was it a case of Damian Lowe doing really, really well to escape his marker and latch onto the header, or was it a breakdown defensively from the Red Bulls? Or
yeah, I think it was just a battle of who's going to outmuscle who, and Damian Lowe came up the stronger player there, and what a beautiful diving header. I actually didn't realize until I watched the replay that it was a diving header. I mean, beautiful header by Damian Lowe, his second Union goal of the season in MLS play. And Yeah, that's hoping. You hope that that's something the Union take advantage of as the season gets closer to an end. And you hit the nail right on the head, Dave. Right? You want to be peaking towards the end of the season. Jim Curtin says that all the time because that's what makes MLS so much different than every other league around the world, where you want to win your games every single week. But here in America, playoffs is all what matters. As long as you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. And I think for some people, that's kind of hard European wise. I'm talking about. It's kind of hard for them to wrap their head around that because, you're used to non-playoff soccer. But I think as Americans, we've kind of come accustomed to that. And maybe for these European players at the Union and just different MLS teams are signing, maybe it's hard for them to get adjusted to that. I remember Mikau Ua, after the first playoff game, he said, these are the atmospheres that we have in Europe every single week. This is enjoyable. This is why I came here, to have these kind of atmospheres. And let's face it, 34 games during the regular season, some of those games, Jose, at Subaru Park, they're quite quiet. And I think we're going to start seeing jam-packed stadiums, whether it be at home or away for the Union. And playoff soccer, this is what we all come to love. And so you just hope that the Union continue to take advantage of these set piece opportunities, that the front three continues to click. And it was just who's going to outmuscle who, and Damian Lowe outmuscled Reyes there for that goal.
I wonder if our fandom's smart. I hate to say smart enough. That sounds awful and pretentious.
Yeah,
so I apologize.
You guys are going to get canceled.
Yeah, I know I'm going to get canceled. But I wonder if our fandom is tuned in enough to realize just how important this September 16th game is. Right? Everybody has circled the New York City Red Bull game, despite them playing little brother role for the last however many years. Right? They haven't really done much against us. New York City FC because of the COVID game. Whatever. DC because it's DC, but I wonder how tuned in the average Union fan that goes, partial season ticket holder, if this was even part of the plan. I don't even know. I don't obviously have my season ticket, so I don't know. But outside of that, do we as fans and fans that are not as tuned in as we are, obviously reporting or talking about it on a daily basis, do they realize just how big this game is and how badly this team will need that type of performance from the stands, right? Making it another Red Bull game. I'm not sure. So I'm really interested, coming back from the international break, what the stadium looks like for such a big game. And I would hope that the Union marketing department and PR put all the muscle into advertising the hell out of this game, right? Coming up on September 16th, because again, the Union will need it.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely. I mean, it's essentially a playoff game. Cincinnati are 11 points in first place in the Supporters Shield standings, I believe it is. So the Union have a game in hand. And if you win this game against Cincinnati, you win the game in hand. Now you're only 5 points behind Cincinnati, and it's game on, right? Nobody thought that Orlando City was going to go into Cincinnati last night and pick up the 1-0 victory. And that's exactly what happened. And we saw it last year. The Union probably should have won the Supporters Shield standings, and it didn't happen because whatever game you want to point out, right?
Red Bull game. Come on. It's Red Bull game. We all know it.
And I was thinking about this too. Wouldn't that be crazy? So let's take it all the way back to March. What if that Montreal game away is the game that the Union don't win the Supporters Shield, where they're up 2-1? Julian Carranza gets that red card, and then the Union give up 2 late goals in the 90th minute and 98th minute. Yeah, what if that's the game, right? That's a game that nobody's going to remember, right? Jim Curtin says, nobody's going to remember this Red Bull game. Yeah. Nobody remembers that Montreal game. What if it happens to be? Well, because Julian Carranza gets a red card in that game, now the Union give up 2 late goals in that game, and that's the reason they don't win the Supporters Shield. Right? That's the reason the Union don't finish in second or third. Very well could be, right?
Right, yeah. Funny enough, I put a reminder on my phone for December 9th. Remember New York Red Bull game on September the 3rd, just so I can reference back to it and be like, no, Jim, I remember. I remember this game, Interesting. No, that's a fair point. And honestly, I could even go a little bit further back, Todd, and think about just that awful Miami performance away at Miami, right? Like, two worldies, sure, outside the box, a volley, and then whatever, a regular shot left-footed from outside in, beating, a rare shot that beats Blake from outside the box as another point of, inflection point of like, shit, had we won that, right? So it's really interesting you mentioned that. Sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to step in like that.
Well, I was going to say, just obviously with Todd's point earlier about the Red Bulls coach perhaps being a bit hesitant of slamming or being critical of the officiating. Jim was, I don't know if Jim was ever fined for it, but I know Jim was extreme. I mean, some of the comments that Jim made post-match, I don't know if Todd, you were sat in that press conference after Montreal. Some of the words that Jim used in that press conference to describe the officiating was definitely something that probably would get a manager fined. I think we've had a couple of those instances this year where perhaps Jim has been a bit more, throwing a bit more caution to and not a bit more reckless with what he has said, or perhaps not caring as much about what he is saying in his press conferences. But of course, with Julian Carranza being mentioned there for his record, the Montreal, we didn't. I think by the time everyone was sort of calming down about that second goal, Carranza pops up with a fantastic finish for the third goal. Kai Wagner with a great cutback, pinpoint position, finds Carranza inside the box, and the first time left-footed effort, he bends the ball into the top corner. I think again that perhaps is where Carranza, you have to take the good with the bad with him, because he can produce a shot like that on his weak foot. We saw it last season as well, where he just out of nowhere would get the ball on his left foot and would just curl a shot into the bottom left corner from 20 yards, with curling it somehow from the outside of the post and squeezing it into the bottom corner. And then you'll get instances like, I think the Colorado game, or I'm trying to think what game it was, where he rounded the goalkeeper and missed an open goal. And I think he's done that a couple of times this year. I think it's very much
sounds about right.
Yeah. I think it's very much that goal was very much showed you the direct contrast of Julian Carranza and the experience you do get with him, because again, he scores some incredible goals. But he's so inconsistent with he'll score like the tough ones, but he'll miss, or he'll somehow find a way to cock up the easier chances, shall I say.
Whoa, Dave, easy. This is a kids show. You can't say that word. you can't say that phrase, Dave. What are you doing when you have to make this rated R? No, you're right.
3 p.m. at 3 a.m. in England, so nobody's listening. Dave can say whatever he wants, right?
It's 90s infomercial session, right? That late in the evening. Back in the day, Girls Gone Wild and all that would be in the 90s on TV at 3 a.m. No, Dave, you're absolutely right. And I can't remember, and Todd, you have a better brain than I do for this type of stuff, but there was a point where Jim was criticizing Carranza for missing a lot of these sitters and sort of, having to, I hate to say sit him down, because we've heard so many instances of him, saying whether he has to sit down with a player or meet with a player, right? You think about Ua and Glesnes these last couple of weeks, but whatever he said to Carranza maybe did help. And maybe it's time, right, to say it again and sort of sharpen up a little bit. And I think maybe a lot of that will happen automatically because of the competition, right? We finally saw the real debut of Tai Baribo, or if you want to shorten it like I do, Taribo, and he's in, right? He's finally made his appearance. He's finally done more than just walk in and walk off the field like he did during his actual debut. So I wonder if that will, just sharpen up both Ua and Carranza all at once. And I guess you could argue Chris Donovan as well.
I mean, it should, right? I mean, I don't think Baribo looked terrible in his debut. I think it's one that people aren't going to remember, right? Because the Union were up 4-1 by the time that he came on. And one thing that's going to stick out about his debut is, and I don't know if you were paying attention at this moment, but he was directing Quinn Sullivan. I don't know if the cameras caught this on Apple or not, but he's directing where Quinn Sullivan needs to run. And Baribo plays the ball exactly where he's telling Quinn to run. And Quinn can't get to the ball. And so, that small instance there tells me that, okay, we've got a really intelligent player that's seeing the game maybe at a bigger picture, a faster speed than some of these Union players are. And so you hope that he comes in, is not motivated. Yeah, I'm just going to sit here and be fine with being the third striker. No, I want to push to take Julian Carranza's spot. I want to take Mikel Uhr's spot, because I don't think anybody's spot other than Kai Wagner and Andre Blake's spots guaranteed in this starting 11. Guys like you can argue too, for sure. But every other position, I think you can debate it. Jose Martinez is probably another one too, now that I think about it. But, the strikers position, I don't think those two are guaranteed week in, week out. And it's crazy to say after the front three led all MLS players in goals last season with a trio. And you have Julian Kranza now scoring in back-to-back games. You have Daniel Gazdag scoring his first goal from open play since May 20th against New England. This front three does seem like they are clicking, and maybe part of that is because Ty's here and they feel the pressure. Whatever the case may be, you want to see those three clicking, and Jim says that all the time. We're going to go as far as this front three takes us. And we've seen really bad moments in the season where the front three is not clicking. They're taking meaningless shots outside the box. They're having shots blocked inside of the 18-yard box, like we saw against Toronto, where they only had 2 shots on target. And I go back to a conversation I had maybe a month ago on an Into Miami podcast, and they asked me, what's the weakest issue right now on this Union team? And I said, it's 100%. They can't score. They're inconsistent. And so you hope as we approach the last 9-8 games of the season that consistency continues to pop up like we saw last night. I don't know. I am confident in that because I think we could probably all agree that last year was probably career years for a majority of these players. They probably will never reach those levels again. And I hate to say this, but last season was probably the year to win MLS Cup, right? Because look at Olsen this year, right? Those guys peaked. A lot of those players had career years, and they probably will never reach the heights that they have. And now all the statistics back that, okay, yeah, these guys are just average players, and look what they're doing in the West this season. Same can be said for the Union this year.
Yeah, I think, as you sort of said, I think last year probably was the golden opportunity. I think, especially with Miami, I think I messaged Jose earlier. Just look at the result Miami got in LA last night as well. Just steamrolling LAFC and not 3-1 win, making it look easy. I think that they're still unbeaten since Messi and Co have obviously joined, and they've got potential to win a domestic treble, which is ridiculous to think of. I mean, of course, they've still got a long way of getting into the playoffs. But yeah, it's sort of a weird thing to look at. Of course,
as Eric says, 2 minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes was the difference between me being a dad of 2 and 1. So yeah, you're right, Eric.
But I mean, I remember putting up a tweet going that a British player is about to send the MLS Cup to Philadelphia, and then had to quickly delete the tweet about 90 seconds later when Gareth Bale headed home against said British player. Of course, again, as you sort of mentioned, Todd saying, I think it was Daniel Gazdag's second open play goal this year. And they've been very much, as opposed to last season, where he couldn't stop scoring from open play. They're very much a collector's item this year. Again, another great through ball from Kai Wagner, who we will get on to discuss in a second. Obviously, Jose, with the interesting quote that you managed to pull out of the mix zone after the press conference. But again, an incredible defense splitting pass on Kai Wagner. Daniel Gazdag with the instinctively making that that forward run to get in between the Red Bulls defense, goes through 1-on-1 and just calmly slots the ball into the back of the net before collapsing onto the floor and clutching at his knee. Again, for you, Jose, is this what you want to see more from, not just Kai, perhaps being a bit more playing these more risky passes as opposed, if he has that option to play it forward with, someone trying to run him behind, or as opposed to being going sideways, but also from Gazdag perhaps being a bit more ruthless with how he, not just with his chances, but, getting into the positions to take the chances. Because I don't think we've seen that enough from Gazdag this year, trying to, do that Frank Lampard sort of role, getting into the box late, trying to get in behind and trying to, become that third striker.
Yeah, it feels like that's something that's been sort of avoiding the Union, or the Union have been avoiding, right? Having that late runner into the box, or Jim says that all the time, and I know we keep referring to him, but it's funny, he uses a lot of these sayings, right? The ball just wasn't bouncing their way, and the way that the ball bounced this way was straight at Gazdag, and Gazdag did what he should have been doing all along, right? Having that trailing run and finding his way to scoring a goal from open play, and maybe shut up some of the naysayers, right? Gazdag continues to climb, and people don't realize it, but he's our second highest scoring ever player for the Union, right? It's an unbelievable feat. So it's to me, it was an awesome goal. And I think, again, Kai just, and this is credit to McGlynn, Bedoya, and everybody who was involved in that midfield, just allowing Kai, by them dictating, the way that the play was going, the speed of play, and allowing Kai to go up and down as he very well pleased. And we know what he can do with that left foot. It's something that is, I think, and that you mentioned, we're going to talk about it, but it's going to be sought after so highly by a lot of teams when you think about maybe the changes that are coming. But just the left foot that's magical, and you see that ball and the way that it was finished. It was awesome. I actually rewatched that specific play a couple of times, thinking this looks great. This is like something you would see in the Premier League, right? Just like an awesome cutback ball like that with a lot of pace, and letting the late runner come in and score it. So do I wish we see that more of Gazdag? Absolutely. But it's difficult. But yeah, I absolutely hope that we see some more of it.
Yeah, I think getting told as well. I think as sort of as I said, you want to see more of, not just from Kai doing it and Gazdag doing it, but just in general, because you see so often when you do get into really good attacking positions. And I think Mikel was probably, and I think is a case. I mean, Bariba might fall into the same trap when presuming he gets more into the team. There are some players that perhaps I'm saying are too good for the MLS, but perhaps too smart for the players around them, or have a better understanding of the game around them. And I know Mikel does get a lot of slack, and gets a lot of flack from fans, and gets criticised a lot for not being as heavily involved in the game. The way when you sort of focus on his game, you watch the attacking runs he makes and the way that he does try and hold up the ball, you can sort of see that his footballing brain perhaps works a bit quicker, or he's a bit smarter than other players. And as you sort of mentioned with Ty Bariba, again, guiding players around, telling players where he wants them to get the ball. Do you feel like Mikel was one of those players as well? I mean, we see so often this season where he makes these attacking runs to get off. He peels away from his defender or marker to try and make a run in behind, and there's the option to play it. And the Union perhaps are too scared to take that risk of playing that through ball, which again, not just Kai Wagner has been suspect of this year, but other players like Gazdag and Carranza, where they have relucted to play that through ball when Uar has made that that defense splitting run. Is that something that the whole team could probably look at and or improve upon as we head into the postseason?
I mean, you hope that's the case, right? I remember, I forget what game it was. It was definitely before Jim Curtin said not good when I asked about Mikel Uar. And it had been at the beginning of League's Cup, because people were talking about, Mikel hasn't scored since the LA Galaxy game. And the one thing I've been noticing about him this whole season is he's making those right runs, but the ball's not coming to him. And he gets caught for being offsides a couple times because he's making that run when the ball should come. And for whatever reason, whether it be a McGlynn, whether it be a Jesus Bueno, Jose Martinez, Ale Bedoya, they're not seeing that run. And so I think, these European players, maybe they're used to the game being a little bit more quicker than what you get in MLS. I think Jim Curtin says that all the time, we're a team that's not built for end-to-end soccer, but I think there are players on this team that are built that way. Mikel Uar certainly seems like a player that can play end-to-end. I think Julian Carranza is a player that can play end-to-end. Daniel Gazdag probably could play end-to-end. Jack McGlynn, that probably doesn't suit his style for sure. But yeah, I do think Mikel Uar is probably reading the game a little bit quicker than some of his teammates. And the one thing Jim's challenged him is to get involved, get linked out with the midfield more. And we have seen that the last couple games. And yes, he didn't score last night against Red Bull, but I do think the ideas are there, whether it be with the runs or the hold-up play or trying to connect better with his midfielders. And you just hope as this team heads towards the playoffs that they can get onto the same page, because I'll keep repeating what Jim says all the time. This team will go as far as that front three goes, because where else are you getting goals? I know last night you got goal contributions from Jacob Glezes, from Damian Lowe. You've got him from Jack McGlynn, Jose Martinez, Ale Bedoya twice off the bench.
Nate Harriel, unlikely person.
Right. But, how often does that happen in this game where you have other players scoring that aren't the front three? I'd be curious, how many games have the Union won where the front three hasn't scored a goal? I can guarantee you that it's been less than 2. I'd be shocked if it's more than 2.
You're counting Gazdag as the front three, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure. Got it. No, yeah, I think your stats probably one that would resonate, right? It would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not a bad thing, right? I mean, you see it all the time. I mean, look at Manchester City. Why they go out and get Haaland to score goals? Goal scorers win you games. And if the Union's front three aren't scoring goals, they're not going to win games. And so you hope that they can continue to click like we've seen the last couple games. You hope that the runs that Mikel's seeing, he continues to make, and you hope that ball gets there faster.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I think, again, the amount of times I've watched games this season, especially on the road, and you have Carranza making a run forward or Garstad making a run forward, and you just watch Uar sort of peeling away from his man a bit, or he's going inside to make that run in between the defenders. You're thinking, as he's making it, play the ball, as they're looking at him doing it, and you'll watch Carranza just deliberately ignore the run and just sort of carry on dribbling until he gets inevitably tackled by a defender, and just sort of like, I'm always sat there like pulling my hair out, or Gerstad will be sort of going forward, watching it, and then will stop and then go sideways. It's just so frustrating. I think, again, it's just trying to take those risks. Again, like, especially, I mean, if you're struggling to create anything anyway, why not, try and utilize your one true player in your team who can, cause the opposition issues defensively by, using his pace to stretch the game, even if you're just putting balls in behind for him to chase down the line to then stretch them out defensively inside the penalty area, which we do see quite often with the Union when they do get caught out in the box in their own penalty area because they're stretched and there's the opposition of taking that risk of trying to play the ball in behind. Also, I don't know if if you'd agree with this. I think Jose Martinez is another player that could probably play end to end. I know, of course, Jim loves to play him in that six, and I know Jose's probably sick and tired of me saying every week, Mike as well. But I feel like Jose Martinez could be better utilised in this team for the way that he plays on the ball and the way that he possesses the ball by playing on that 8 on that right-hand side of the diamond, because it will allow him to go up and down the pitch. He can take more risks on the ball as opposed to trying a Cruyff turn or trying to turn past, spin a forward on the edge of the penalty area. I feel like he could be better utilised in that position. It could also help the Union, especially in road games, perhaps, being a bit more of a threat going forward.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to see Jose Martinez out there on the wing, right, or out wide, because we saw down DC blew his hamstring or had some discomfort in his hamstring on that long run. Saw it last year against Orlando City, I believe it is. But no, I think you are right, because every time he's away with the national team, they play him as a right midfielder. They play him out wide, and so he has the pace, right? I think that he has the skill. He has the dribbling ability that you want from your outside players. I think what I want to see the Union do is, I think we can all agree that their best formation is the 4-4-2 diamond. Why not just have your 2 shuttlers, your 2 8s, and then your 6 just interchange throughout the game? I think that would cause a lot of confusion against the opposition where, okay, you're going with Bueno, McGlynn, and Martinez. Have them just interchange. Bueno go to the 6, Martinez go to the 8, McGlynn go to the 6 at times, Martinez and Bueno go. And I know we've seen that a couple times this season, but I wouldn't be against seeing Jose Martinez. I mean, he's so good defensively, but he's a confident player going at players 1v1 dribbling, and maybe a little bit too close for our liking where he's dribbling in his own defensive half, trying to beat a guy and make it look skillful. But that's what you want, right? You want these players that are confident, that believe in their abilities, and some of these players on this team, maybe you just don't feel that way, right?
Yeah. I think, again, I do actually quite like the idea of what you just mentioned of the rotating 6s, of giving other players freedom to go off and do their own thing, especially, I think, again, I quite like the idea of Jack McGlynn sort of being that deep line playmaker, just sitting in between the back four, just, playing that sort of quarterback role, playing the ball around, playing forward passes. Jose, what do you think of that idea of, having, sort of interchanging those sort of 3, but in behind Gazdag, which could perhaps allow Martinez to have more freedom to push forward and attack fullbacks? Because as we've seen, I think, was it in, I'm trying to think what game, it might have been a DC game, the game year? It was. No, it was this year when he literally just ran the entire length of the pitch before.
Yeah, it was DC. It was DC.
Yeah, but he just ran the entire length of the pitch from, of course, when off a counter attack. That's sort of what this team does lack.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We don't have an Ilsini to come in and be 2-3 players and throw something in there, may it be a low ball or a cross, etc. So I think it would be an interesting experiment to go through. And I know this is something you've been calling for quite some time, Dave. So I know that we're working through your laundry list of ideas. And I think you're absolutely right. We've seen Martinez do it last year. I think it was against Toronto at the Union, where we saw Martinez have a beautiful run down the sideline, eventually pass it in. I think it was Corey Burke who tapped it in. I can't remember. Now you fast forward to this year, and we've seen Martinez sort of show these flashes of if he's more in an advanced position and has the freedom to attack more than he does now, being sort of the firefighter, right? Puts out all the fires on the defensive, on the early stages of the defensive end. I think it would be a very interesting experiment, especially as we start to think about having to be more nimble in terms of replacing players that maybe will be leaving the team, let alone not being re-signed per se. In terms of age, maybe somebody like, I don't know what happens with Bedoya after the season, right? So just a thought experiment there. And again, Todd, you and I sort of like talked about it. You know what, Matt Reale's on a 1-year deal, and granted, we saw him a few times this year, and not it has been a very long time since we saw him. But is he coming back, right? So you start thinking about depth and having to be more agile with the bodies that you're bringing in, and who sticks around. Again, you think about the bodies that were brought in this year, and in reality, only one remains, because I don't know that Torres will ever see the field again. Obviously, Perea is out on loan to New York City FC, and Lowe is the only one that has really survived the Union gauntlet of grinding, and he's the one who's thrived. I don't know if it's because he's actually wanted to be here per se, right? He has that history with Reading United and his history with the city, coming and watching games as a kid, etc. So I'd be intrigued onto, how much more spicy Jim can get with experimenting with players going forward.
Yeah, I was going to say, with regards to Bedoya, I think Eric mentioned 20-year contract extension would probably be in line in over the winter. But I think, of course, Jose, as you sort of alluded to, players leaving and in over the winter, especially, I think is a big one. And of course, you got a very, very big soundbite from one player who was out of contract with the unit at the end of this season in Kai Wagner. Obviously, if you could just go through, obviously, what Kai said, what you obviously asked Kai, what Kai said in response, and to obviously give your analysis or look at what it means heading into next season.
Todd, were you immediately there? I can't remember that like 20-minute blip or 15-minute blip of being in that mix zone is like such a blur because how everything happened so quickly. You were right there immediately next to me, right?
Yeah, I was in there, and I'm so grateful for the access that we get.
Right.
And it's so distracting, right? With the music in the locker room, with the players, kids running around like crazy. So, I mean, sometimes it's hard to hear exactly what the players say to you. And like, I re-listened to all the audio. Like, I felt like I was pretty close to Kai Wagner. I thought I had good audio right there. And I listened to it. I was like, I cannot hear a word that he said. So I'm glad that you got good audio from that.
No. And the reason I asked if you were there is because I think my face was pretty telling. Like I expected it's not decided yet. I'm working through it. I've done everything I can. I'm waiting for the other side, etc. So for him to come out and say, this is very much my last year. Yeah, this is my last year. I'm moving on. I'm paraphrasing or maybe just, giving you guys a summary, but I was in awe. Just sort of like, oh my God. And, I mentioned I had a guest with me, his Oscar Budigen, who knows PR. He's worked PR as a professional with Coca-Cola, Aramark, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he understands it. So after he saw me rush and do everything I did to get that quote out, he asked me for more context. He knew I was working, so he didn't ask me, he didn't bug me or anything. But once I gave him all the context, his question was, why the hell did they let him speak of all players, right? Why would you let this guy who seems to be a bit of a loose cannon go and talk without the PR person being next to them? So it was interesting. For full disclosure, I don't have to. I absolutely do not have to. But I did run it through Union PR by two individuals there to make sure that they knew, hey, this is what he said to me. You can listen to it. I'm going to post it. Do you need me to hold it for a little bit? Just being as polite as I could, being as kind as I could. And Dave, you get this, working for PR for a soccer club, giving the courtesy of 15, 20 minutes of I'll give you 15, 20 minutes, then it's going live type of thing.
Yeah.
But they were very okay with, no, that's okay. It is what it is. Go for it. So to me, it was sort of amazing. And I was telling Todd earlier today, I had to turn off my phone for a little bit and eventually just turn off the notifications because my battery was just draining from it, like buzzing and rookie mistake, right? I don't ever get that many notifications that my battery dies so quickly. So it's a shame. You know, I know reasonable minds can defer onto how you feel about Kai Wagner, whether he has been a great steward for the club or servant, I guess is the better word. I think there's also an argument about whether he's earned himself the designated player money. And even some arguments that you can make about, you know, he needs a better agent. And to me, that one just doesn't make sense because if you think about it, who would put pen to paper when you think about the rule changes that are about to happen in the next, you know, December 9th is the last day of that's the MLS Cup actual game. After that, it's the Wild West, right? Nobody knows what's going to happen. So all signs are pointing at wallets loosening a little bit, right? Purse strings being loosened a bit, that owners that want to spend, you think of the Teppers of the world out in Charlotte, or you have teams like Cincinnati that have very, very savvy individuals that know it's no mistake. It's no, you know, coincidence that they come from Philadelphia and Chris Albright and Pat Noonan, who sort of, you know, are shaping something very, very special. That would be very interested in a player like Kai. So to be able to share that quote with everybody was awesome. It was a cool experience, hopefully one of many, but ultimately, you know, I personally want the guy back. And I really hope that the union find a way to keep him, despite him maybe utilizing me, honestly, as a way to negotiate. And that's totally fair. I totally get that part of the game too. But I'd be intrigued to hear from both of you on in terms of what you thought of the quote and whether you think he has earned that designated player. Maybe I'll go to Todd this time around.
I was going to say I'll go to Dave because I was trying to pull up something, but I can go if you want, Dave. So I saw somebody interacting with you on Twitter because I refuse to call it X. And they said something about Kai Wagner's agent. He needs to fire his agent. Well, to put it out there for context, Kai Wagner essentially did do that towards the end of the last season. He signed with Washerman Sports Agency, which is a big sports agency. I was looking right here at the list of players. All the players that they have contracted, it's 825 players that have deals with this agency. A market value of $1.5 billion. This is a huge agency. They have the likes of John Stones, Valverde from Real Madrid, Nathan Ake from Manchester City, yeah, Harvey Barnes, Andre Blake's a part of this agency group. And I was trying to look at other union players and just other MLS players in general, because there are a couple other ones. And so Kai Wagner fired his agent towards the end of last season in hopes to get him a move in the wintertime, and nothing materialized. And so I think, you know, this is Kai Wagner and his agent using you in a sense, Jose, which you said you're fine with, you know, speaking to the media. And fair play to asking that question. You approached Kai and you said, you know, I talked to you about this contract situation about a month, 2 months ago. Where does that stand now? And he's like, it's out of my hands. This is my last year in Philadelphia. And I remember, you know, just speaking to him a couple months ago, he said, you know, this is probably going to be my last year in Philadelphia. But as soon as Kai got done talking to you, I was like, did he just say that this is his last year? I was stunned that he said that. And you're right. I mean, a loose cannon like Kai Wagner, us and the media, we love it, right? A player that's unfiltered, who's going to speak his mind. I mean, there's been instances where Kai Wagner's, you know, not been pleased with some of his teammates, and he's not afraid to call them out to the media. And I was shocked that Nico, Erica were not with Kai Wagner, because you usually see them with a player, but Kai Wagner's all alone right there. And there's your opportunity to ask him, right? Because let's face it, if one of them were there, they're probably shutting you down. They are not letting that get out. But because Kai Wagner's alone, you got that quote, and it absolutely blew up. And I'm sitting here like, man, I would love for my phone to blow up as much as you.
No, you don't. No, you don't. No,
getting all these engagements, but I think I saw 174 views on that quote. Okay, probably not. But I guess now you know what Tom Bogut goes through every time he puts out a quote. So you had your Tom Bogut day for a quote with Kai Wagner, but yeah, I was shocked that Kai said that, and I'm not surprised that he said that. I maybe I'm being naive, but I still feel like there's hope, right? That he does stay in Philadelphia because he's went back and forth so many times when he's been asked about this in the media. Yeah, I want to go back to Europe. Yeah, I'll stay here in MLS. Yeah, I don't know what my contract situation goes like. You go out and fire your agent, and we're not naive. You fire your agent to try to facilitate a move abroad. And I talked about Washerman's just agency. They have top players all over in the top 5 leagues in Europe. And so, of course, Kai Wagner sees that and he's like, all right, I'll go sign with this agency and maybe they can get me moved to the top 5. Nothing happened in the summertime. Nothing happened in the wintertime. And part of me feels like maybe Kai Wagner and his agency are realizing he's just not that valued in Europe. Like, let's be honest for a second. Like, he's, in my opinion, the best left back in MLS, but if he was really that good, don't you think more teams would be in for Kai Wagner? And not saying that they weren't, because the Union have a price and maybe teams weren't meeting that price, but I feel like we definitely would have seen more talk because we saw the rumors about Leeds United, West Ham being interested in Kai Wagner, but we never read anything about them offering the Union money for Kai Wagner. And so, yeah, that's great that you have players that are teams that are interested in players. But until an official offer comes in, so be it. And maybe teams are trying to say, you know what, we're going to negotiate with Kai Wagner because we can get him on a free in the wintertime. We're telling Kai, we're interested in you. Let your contract run out and we'll sign you on a free so we don't have to pay a transfer fee. Maybe that's part of it. But I do feel like Kai Wagner, maybe he's okay staying here in America. Maybe he's okay getting paid over $1 million because I think that's probably what Kai's asking for is over $1 million, which would probably guarantee you DP money. I know Bedoya for a time there was making over $1 million, but because of TAM or GAM or whatever, they bought that down, and so it doesn't count as a DP spot. So that's why they were able to open that up, and maybe that's something that the Union can mess with, but my biggest fear is I look at a team like LAFC, Palacios, the left back. He's a free agent after the season. They have money. Why wouldn't they throw that money at Kai Wagner? Cincinnati's a team that scares the hell out of me. I know Barrial is their left back, left wing back. There's been rumors that he could go to Ajax in the wintertime and other European clubs. I don't expect Barrial to stay with Cincinnati past this wintertime, but we've been saying that about Kai Wagner, so maybe he does, but I can see Chris Albright, Kyle McCarthy, Pat Noonan coming in for, yet again, another Philadelphia Union player in Kai Wagner. They know him. They play with wingbacks. He would be fantastic in Cincinnati. His best buddies, Sergio Santos, is in Cincinnati. It makes sense why he would go to Cincinnati. Cincinnati have the money to pay him. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he leaves the Union or he leaves MLS in general. I think that he's just trying to use the media. His agent saying, hey, look, talk to the agent, and we're going to go ahead and see if we can get the Union to take us serious and go to our demands. If not, we're going to go ahead and listen to other offers in MLS or abroad.
I was messaging back and forth with somebody earlier today, and this is the kickoff. It feels like, he communicated to congratulated me in the quote. B, communicated to me, congratulations, you just kicked off the Kai Wagner sweepstakes, because as soon as that bit went out last night, all the coaches that picked up on it, all the general managers that may have picked up on it, absolutely started contacting one another. So he kind of joked like, awesome quote, but just so you know, you just started an arms race. It's like,
I mean, you did, right? I mean,
yeah, no, I absolutely did.
That guy may have been joking, but you absolutely did. And this is exactly what Kai Wagner and his agent want, to put the pressure on the Union's front office. And I'm seeing people say here in the chat, so I don't know how to put them in so people can see this. There we go. Sergio Santos should be calling Kai Wagner every day. He probably is. And if Kai Wagner does go to Cincinnati, you're right, Jimmy. This fan base will never forgive this front office. Like Ernst Tanner, I know he just signed a contract extension. he might as well be fired. Jay Sugarman might as well sell the team because this fan base will not forgive the Union if he winds up in Cincinnati or I think anywhere else in MLS because you cannot lose a player as quality as Kai Wagner. 3 assists last night. He's never done that in his career. He's the player on this team that creates the most chances. And yes, he'd have a lot more assists than he does right now. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they would be a lot more than what it currently is if the Union can finish off players. Throughout League's Cup, he was one of the most createful players. But again, the Union lacked the finishing ability. How can you lose a player like that? Like, how aren't you doing everything in your power to make sure he does not leave? If he is expressing to you that I will stay in Philadelphia, yes, I've said I want to go back to Europe. Why aren't you doing everything in your power to make this guy stay? And I know the argument could be, well, there could be another Kai Wagner out there. But do people in this fan base trust Ernst Tanner after the last couple transfer windows? I think that's a legitimate question. Andres Pereira, Joaquin Torres, Damian Lowe, Richard Odada, Obasa. Do you guys feel confident? Something has changed, whether it be disconnect between Ernst Tanner and Jim Curtin for Jim Curtin not playing the players that Ernst Tanner is signing for the club. Because there is definitely some disconnect in the club. And I don't know exactly where it is. But is this fan base really confident looking at the last couple transfer windows for Kai Wagner to leave this club and Ernst Tanner to say, we'll just go ahead and find another Kai Wagner?
Funny enough, this very same person taught me what bookmarks are for the type of stuff I put out, right? That quote, the bookmarks. He's like, I'm 75% sure that that's probably people who are going to use that to share tomorrow morning with leadership at different clubs to say, hey, he's not interested, he's not interested in sticking around. He's someone who's on the move, that type of thing. So no, it's interesting to be sort of, and this is my last bit on it because it feels a little presumptuous on my end. And I must admit, it makes me a little uncomfortable, but, feels kind of weird being part of the machine in a way, right? Like to sort of kick off something like this and be part of it. It's just a fascinating. But to your point, Todd, I'm intrigued to hear from you, Dave. There has to be a way, right? Like if the Union are going to, and if I'm Kai, I get it, right? You see money being tossed about to bring in these 3 bodies. Granted, some of it or most of it was funny money. And then you bring in Ty and you see players leave to go get paychecks because the team's not willing to do it. If you're Kai, you're sort of like, guys, like what's going on? And then you think about, how badly this team, if Kai does leave, how badly this team fumbled the entire operation by not putting something in front of Kai that was appealing enough for him to sign pre-Messi, right? Before you hear all this commentary from coaches saying the rules have to change, something has to be done. You have a foreign entity, foreign being a company, not a sovereign wealth fund or a sovereign nation pumping money into a transfer, but you have Apple and Adidas incentivizing the move of the greatest player ever to come to MLS and play for Inter Miami. So it just hurts my heart to the deepest and the core of it to see that the Union may have really, really just fumbled arguably one of their best players ever, right? And in terms of Kai and him going out on a free, like it's unbelievable. But Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
I think it's interesting. I think again, one from like a media perspective, I'm just shocked that, of course, he's got a hat trick of assists and a win. So, I mean, you probably would perhaps bring that to the media. But again, I'm just shocked that no one was stood with him or no one with him to mediate the questions. That was the one thing that shocked me in that respect. Looking at the deal, I mean, again, maybe it is poor squad planning or, looking ahead to the future, like for the Union. But how often do you see a top player in the MLS go for free? Do you know what I mean? I can't really think of any time that a player, even if it's gone over to Europe, or returned to Europe, whatever, or gone to Europe, and whether he's moved on from one MLS team to another, like, I can't really think of a top player that's left the team on a free. And I think it's one of the big issues with the Union's, whether maybe it's the contract structure and the way that they just hack on loads of year extensions or year options at the end, like in each contract, as opposed to giving players 4 or 5 year contracts. Like Carranza, the fact his deal runs out next year not only limits the amount of money that the team could potentially make, up front, especially as you've mentioned, Jose and Todd as well, like the way the league's changing, like the money that's going to be invested in the league over these next few years. I mean, of course, we've seen the MLS, before, in recent times, there's money involved, but it's all restricted to a certain amount. Next season, it could be possibly a bit more like the Premier League and every other leagues where it's gun ho, the biggest budget wins, or the biggest budget is going to get the best players. And the way the union do structure their deals in terms of contracts just perhaps hamper the maximizing the amount they're going to get on players being sold. I can't imagine that Carranza is going to get more than, or can't imagine going to get more than 5 or 6 million for Julian Carranza in December or even during next summer. Because again, he's got a year left. The club can literally turn around to him and go, okay, we'll wait out until the summer when he's got 6 months left in his contract, and we can come and sit down with him. We can talk out, and as long as we can sit down with him and we can offer him a contract because he's got 6 months left. I'm intrigued to see if perhaps the team has done that for Kai, and that's perhaps why he has looked at it now and gone, I'm not going to be here next year. Perhaps a team in Europe or a team in the MLS has said, I was offered him a good package to go next season, which has gone under the radar.
I regret, and maybe Todd can sort of, back me up in this, but it felt like after I asked my question, Kai was just ready to go. Where I actually thought after the fact, shit, I could have asked more, right? Like if he was that willing to tell me that this was his last year in Philadelphia, and he was, totally as open as it gets about it. In hindsight, is it in the MLS? Is it Europe? Like, what are you seeking? And I don't know what his answer would have been. It would be so interesting to sort of hear that. And hindsight being 2020, he could have just said, no, I can't talk about that right now. And Dave, maybe that would allude to your point, right? Of like maybe he has something already in the works with his agent and agency and finding a landing spot that makes sense if it's abroad, because it's still, again, maybe there's certainly more that we don't know. Maybe agents and people who have their ear to the ground more in terms of what would a Kai next year with all the changes that they probably have a good sense on that are coming for in terms of spending from owners. What would a Kai demand in the league, right? So I wonder what he wants. Does he want to stay within the United States, or does he want to go abroad? I honestly cannot tell, because Todd, you said it earlier, he's flip-flopped so many times.
Yeah, yes. And interesting. I mean, you probably could have asked a follow-up question for sure. I mean, that's on us too, that we're standing right next to you. I think we were all just shocked that he was that open with you, that it caught everybody off guard. And maybe we shouldn't have been, but we were. And I think my question would have been to him, it would have been, all right, so it's not your decision. Whose is it? Are you calling out the front office? Have you and your agent gave them a number? Are they not reaching that number? I mean, would he have answered that? Maybe not. But the more I think about it, I do think this was a play by Kai and his agent. And it's interesting to me because we're seeing this more and more in football, and maybe Dave can speak on this even more. In Europe, you're seeing a lot of players leaving on freeze. I mean, just this past season, this summer window, so many players left on free contracts, which we don't normally see that in soccer. I feel like teams, they want to get something for those players, and now we're seeing players sign one contract, and then they say, you know what, I'm not renewing. And if you guys can't sell me, well, then you get nothing for me. I mean, look at Yuri Tillemans with Leicester. He left the club for a free. David De Gea left Manchester United for a free. Not that they were going to get any money for him, but I feel like a player like Tillemans, Leicester could have got something for him. And maybe this is the new norm now in Dave, where players are going to sign one contract and let their contracts run out.
That's an interesting point. I think, again, could very much, as I mentioned with Julian Carranza, could very much see the same with Carranza. I don't know if perhaps it's in the new norm. Maybe I think, obviously, as you mentioned, I think United were hoping just to move on from De Gea, Tielemans. I think had Leicester probably stayed in the Premier League, I think they may have probably gotten the new deal secured. Of course, they got relegated, so that damaged killed off their chances. I think Soonchu left Leicester on a free as well to go to Atletico Madrid. That's another player that was obviously received prior transfer interest. But I think perhaps a lot of teams do view, which is why they're willing to let players leave on a free. In terms of Premier League wise, looking at the Premier League, we view safety. Like we believe that this player is going to get us to safety, and we somewhat value his contributions in the final year of his contract and keeping us up, as opposed to selling on for a fee now. I think as well, obviously, going to about 200 crowns, of course. I believe there was a report that came out today, but just earlier, regarding a bid from Olympiacos for, I believe, $7 million. And I'm not being funny. This is the end of the summer transfer window. You give it 4 or 5 months. When the next window rolls around, Carranza's got less than a year left in this deal. And the Union going to get more than $7 million from him in January? Probably not, because again, as I sort of said, these teams will probably look at it and go, well, I mean, we could just wait until the summer and try and give him the best possible contract or best possible deal we can give him on a free, and use the money that we were going to spend for him and reinvest it in the contract. So, I think again it's going to be very, very interesting. Not just winter with Kai, but I think a year, because we're going to see perhaps some very big, some of the bigger hitters of the Union potentially moving on as well. Maybe if Carranza was to leave in the winter or refuses to sign a new deal, that might force their hand in keeping Mikel Leroy, or perhaps extending his deal a bit longer. I know, of course, it probably looks unlikely at the moment with the way that he's been used. But yeah, I think it's going to become a very, very interesting period for the Union. I think, again, losing two, if they were, say, to lose two of their two cornerstone players of the team in the space of a year, probably would be catastrophic, especially if it's on the free. Both of them on free deals would be catastrophic when you're looking at New England selling a goalkeeper for, was it like $20 million and ridiculous fees. Like, again, I think, how much did Castellanos go for? Again, Jose, I don't know if you would have a rough estimate, but I think he went for a fair amount.
No, I don't remember. Well, it was interesting because it was money from one pocket to the other, because it was within the city group, but it was, New York City FC to, was it Girona? I think it was out in Spain. And then he went to Lazio. Yeah. So the first move, like I said, money moving from one pocket to the other, almost like, Aaron Trusty and the Colorado Rapids going to Arsenal, right? Again, owner moving money from one pocket to the other in a really weird roundabout way. But no, I agree with you, Dave. This is so fascinating on how badly this can be come December 9th, right? And honestly, in terms of Carranza, again, I do not blame any MLS player right now. And I bet you it might be sort of a conversation within the MLS Players Union, if they have a Discord or a group chat, right? Of like, listen, wait, no one put pen to paper right now, because we don't know what the outlook looks like for next year, right? We don't know what the purse strings, we don't know what the budgets look like. We don't know what owners are going to be able to spend or not spend, how it's going to be categorized, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We had the David Beckham rule come into effect when he came in. Is there going to be a messy rule that adds another DP spot, et cetera? Who knows? There's a lot of rumors floating around. So honestly, if I'm an MLS player with a contract running out, if it's like Kai's, or if you're thinking into Carranza, right? What is it, like 13, 14 months left on his deal, whatever it is, why would you put pen to paper right now? Just wait until the new guidance, the guiding rules and the rubric comes out, right, onto how you're going to be paid next year, or what you can demand. I think if you have an agent, obviously it doesn't apply to everybody. It probably applies more to superstar players than others. But ultimately, if your agent's telling you sign a paper now without knowing what it's going to look like next year, fully knowing that it's going to change, I think you have a bad agent. But then again, I'm not a professional at this.
So my only argument would be, I mean, I know there's rumors out there that, there could be a fourth DP coming, the salary cap could go up, but wouldn't the MLSPA and MLS have to ratify a new CBA contract? Because I'm looking at this contract that the MLS Players Association just signed. It's through 2028, and they signed it in 2020. So
that was one of my questions to
Bedoya.
Yeah, that was one of my questions to Bedoya through Twitter that he never answered, and I'm
gotta ask him in person.
And
I mean, he
that's
is
what
the union's representative, so he would know.
and I'm eager to ask him in person next time I see him. And would there be an emergency, meeting, right? If the owners are coming up with new rule sets that are unprecedented and are not technically in line with the bargaining agreement, you would think. And I'm not a union person. I've never worked in a job that has a union. And Todd, I don't think you have. Dave, have you ever worked for a union or within a union?
No, I've never worked for the union. No.
Okay, my guess is that they would have. Where are union people? I think we know one specifically, right? Where's our union person that could give us some guidance here? But I would think that if your employer is suddenly changing the rules on their end, you'd think that they would have an opportunity to make some changes, so have some ratification or a say in it. So
Where's Jillian Olmini? I saw she was commenting. She's in a union.
Yeah, teacher union.
She would know.
Yeah, so if school districts were to suddenly say, yeah, we're able to do more, you would think that the teacher union would want to step in. All right, then our pay scale is a little different, or our needs will be a little bit different too, to coincide with the increases that you're going to be shelling out. So yeah, that's something for us as I use the term journalist so lightly, though, with how this weekend has gone. I maybe should put that more onto that feather on my cap a little bit more proudly.
Yeah, definitely now.
Yeah. But
it might be too big time for us now. I mean, Jose is going to be disappearing from the show, starting his own show. And yeah, sorry, everybody. This is Jose's last week. He forgot to tell you guys at the beginning of the show and wanted to leave it till the end. But
stop it.
Maybe I'll be filling in for Jose now instead of Mike.
No, Mike's too busy doing the New York Post stuff nowadays. So yeah, that's a valid point, Todd. So I'm intrigued to hear what the MLSPA has to do that. And you know what? I'll actually shoot a message to the MLSPA after this, see if they're willing to even comment or even like speculate on it. I'll shoot a shot there and see what happens.
I think again, it's going to be very, very interesting. Of course, I mean, now we've got an extended break before the next game, which is probably very weird, with I can't remember the last time the union actually had an international break or had a break during international fixtures. So it's probably nice to see, especially with players battling fitness issues. The team will get Jose Martinez back despite losing Ali Bedoya. So they get Jose back. I think Jesus is out for another 2 games due to violent conduct. I think it's 2 more games. There's 3 game suspension.
I haven't seen the report. I haven't seen the report, the disciplinary report. I joke with Todd. I get mine in like 4 paragraphs that are all in Spanish, and I love it. It cracks me up. And I didn't see anything about the disciplinary report yet. Have you, Todd?
No, I have not.
So I wonder if that they're just waiting for.
I mean, Bedoya is going to miss the next game in Cincinnati. Yeah, he was
right. We know that.
Yeah, we know that. Jesus Bueno. Usually, I thought on the reports they would say if it's a multiple game suspension. So maybe not. I mean, it is his second red card this season. First one against Colorado. Now had one against Toronto. So maybe, but I did not see anything in that report. So.
We're really bad journalists. Come to think of it, we are really bad. How did we not ask Jim this?
Well, never mind. I'm not going to make a comment.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I think again, of course, be interesting to see what sort of team you get back. It'd be an opportunity for players to get fit. Of course, we'll look to the Cincinnati game next week because again, we've got a week of nothing really. I think I believe there are some games going on across the MLS. I think. Miami plays. I don't know if, and obviously I know it's a Miami play. I don't know if that will be their first time playing without Messi. I presume he'll be getting called up. But of course, thank you everyone for listening in to the podcast. And before we do go, Todd, if now's your chance to promote not just yourself but the Free Kick podcast and all the great work that you do. Plug away.
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to thank, Jose for reaching out to me literally last minute for saying, hey, what are you doing? I was like, fantasy football draft. Then thought about recording my podcast, but I was like, yeah, probably not going to have enough time to do all that. So
I appreciate it.
I was like, you know what, we'll record my podcast on Tuesday. And so that's when the Free Kick podcast will be recorded. We'll see, if I get it posted on Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, morning. But yeah, so I record a weekly 2-week episode podcast, try to do a pregame show, pregame show. No, that's not the word. I try to do a pre-match episode. Try to get a commentator usually on the podcast from usually the opposing team, but because MLS has went national with Apple, it's been hard to come by this year. So I've not had much luck this year getting those type of people on. But I always do a post-game show, usually recorded on Sunday, posted on Monday morning. So I'm going to recap the New York Red Bulls game just like we did. If you guys want to hear more stats, if you guys can tell, I love stats. So if you're a stats guy, then check out the free kick. You can find that on all platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google. Just search the free kick. It'll come up. Social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Free Kick Pod. And I also do, like Dave talked about, goal breakdowns on YouTube where I analyze, not only the goals, but missed plays or big game plays. And that is on YouTube at Free Kick Pod. And I appreciate all the support. And, just meeting people like you guys. I mean, when you guys were on my show, like, oh man, we have a guy in England covering the Union. It was the coolest thing with Dave. And then Jose kind of comes out of nowhere. And yeah, it's been great getting to know Jose, going down to DC with him and Skylar, and just growing that friendship. And, one thing I love is just there's a lot of people that don't get paid. And I've been saying this a lot on my show, that cover the Union just for the love of the sport. And, we would all love to have our big break and get paid doing this, but it's just not to be right now, which is fine. It's been really amazing seeing how many people have got into the Union, whether it be doing podcasts like yourselves, writing like yourselves, people finding other ways just to stay relevant in the ever-changing media landscape. And I'm just grateful for all the friendships that I made, and really thankful for you guys having me on the show tonight. And hopefully we can continue to do more stuff like this. I know you said, Jose, maybe get all content creators and do a big show here on Across the Pitch. That would be fantastic. I don't know how long that episode's going to be. I mean, we're at an hour 30 right now. We might be pushing 3 hours if we get all those people on. So
apologize. We apologize to all listeners this week. I might put a disclaimer in the start of the show.
Dave, we apologize to you.
Yeah. I kept telling Jose, I felt so bad when you were on my show. It was like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, oh no, it's fine. And, coming into the show, I knew what to expect now. Like, man, you guys are just going to go ahead and take as long as you need. And so I don't feel bad now. It's your show. I don't have to do all the editing. So we can talk for another 30 minutes, another hour. I'm cool with it. I know Mike was saying that, it can only be a 45-minute show. Man, that does not happen with you guys. It always goes over. So thank you guys so much for having me on the show tonight.
Wait, hold on. This is a valid question. And Todd, you probably know better, having been doing this a little bit longer. It seems like the Union are probably that one of those rare few that have this many. I would probably argue, honestly, I don't know how length or how long some of these shows have been or content creators have been around, but I'm guessing Miami suddenly this year has gotten a lot of people interested in covering it.
So my understanding, MLS teams took a big hit when Vox Media and God, we can be here for another hour if we really want to get into this discussion, but I'm sure everybody wants to go now, so we don't. So when SB Nation, Vox Media decided to axe their MLS coverage, MLS teams took a huge hit. And people, if they wanted to start their own company, start their own thing, then they did. But a lot of those people just didn't do it. And so a lot of MLS teams are really lacking the coverage. I know when I was out to Colorado, press box was dead. There was like 4 or 5 people from one outlet there. And I feel like that typically wouldn't happen in press boxes. But when you get to a place like Colorado, where it's a god-awful team and nobody cares about covering them, they're going to bring anybody and everybody up there in the press box. So I would say the Union are definitely very, very fortunate to have so many people like us, Jose and Dave, covering this team. And you just don't see it a lot in MLS. And I'm thankful that the Union give us the coverage. They never say no. They're very willing to work with us. The other MLS PR departments that I've worked with have been very willing to grant me access to go into the press box. So I'm grateful for all the relationships that I've built. And so, again, just thank you guys so much for having me on the show. And I love what you guys are doing. And it's a great thing to see just so many people supporting each other. I used to get this question a lot, and I know I'm rambling now. When I first started covering the union, like, isn't there jealousy between all you different podcasters? Well, when I started covering the union in 2019, there really wasn't a ton of us. And now there's like 10, 15 different union podcasts, more people writing about this team. But, as the years have went on, I'm like, I don't care. Like, everybody's just trying to give people as much coverage as they can for the Philadelphia Union. I think as fans of the game, fans of the league, fans of the team, that's what we could hope for, right? Is like getting as much coverage as possible. And like I said, don't forget, majority of the people that are doing this are doing it for free.
Again, we do it for the love, not just of the sport, but the team that we do cover, which is obviously the union. That's the one thing that we do all have in common. Again, of course, Todd, thank you so much. Joining us tonight on such short notice. Again, we apologise to the listeners for how long the show is. Obviously, we've gone over 90 minutes now, heading into our 10 minutes of stoppage time due to time wasting. But again, obviously, Todd, you do some great work. Especially, I do enjoy this. I'm watching and tuning in your goal breakdowns and sort of your key moment breakdowns, and it's just a great added insight that perhaps again you don't get, not just with you don't really get with other coverage of not just any MLS teams, but in general, you don't really get that coverage. It's such a unique thing that you do, and of course, if you guys haven't checked out Todd's work before, make sure you do check it out at the Free Kick Pod, and obviously go onto the YouTube channels for all the goal breakdowns and everything else that Todd does, which obviously edits himself. Again, thank you so much for joining us this week, Todd, and Jose. Again, thank you very much for jumping in, and we will see you guys, and producing as well, producing as well. And we will see you guys next week, whether we do the podcast roundtable reunion thing, which will probably go about 7 hours. We will keep you updated. But again, thank you so much for tuning in, and go Union, and hopefully there's no injuries in this international break.
Oh my goodness. Don't even see ya.
So yeah.